Hello, everyone, and welcome into Sports Talk Chicago. I am Joey Christopoulos. Happy Saturday. Hope you're having an absolutely wonderful weekend. Let's talk about Jed Hoyer and the Chicago Cubs reaching a 5-year extension. President of Operations Jed Hoyer is going to stick around for what could possibly be his 19th season, maybe even 20 years with the Chicago Cubs. Now, let me start by saying that I believe that Jed Hoyer has done a good job as general manager of the Chicago Cubs. Sure, there are plenty of things that we can criticize. And trust me, I've done plenty of that criticism here on this show. As a Cubs fan, do I wish sometimes that they acted like a big boy organization? That they would go out and spend the big money for the big fish free agent? To this point, the Chicago Cubs haven't done that. They're still, the highest paid player in Chicago Cubs history is still Jason Hayward. Dansby Swanson not that far away. They still haven't paid a player over $200 million in the span of a contract yet. For the Chicago Cubs, for the Wrigleyville experience, for the ticket prices, you would think at the very least they would have one of them by now, but they haven't. But given those constraints, I think Jed Hoyer has done a really great job trying to remake this thing on the fly. When Theo Epstein left after 2020, Jed was put in a bit of a tough position. The ownership wanted to slash money, and he had to make some hard decisions with a Cubby core that won a 2016 World Championship. And in 2021, after a hot start with the Cubs team, they fell off the map, and then he had to do that hard choice of selling off the Cubby core. To be fully transparent, I was not on board with that deal at the time. I was not on board and still not on board with them non-tendering Kyle Schwarber. And it wasn't just because Kyle Schwarber played poorly. They declined to pick up a $10 million option, and then they just spent $8 million on Jock Peterson. So really, they just wanted to save $2 million instead of sticking with the homegrown player who already had a Bambino myth-like legacy going on in Chicago that had already won a World Series ring. And they just simply ran out of patience and moved on. Look how that worked out. It just hasn't worked out very well. The next one that I didn't like is I still don't like to this day the fact that Jed Hoyer traded Anthony Rizzo. And I get it. Anthony Rizzo's numbers never got back to the heyday of 30 home runs and 100-plus RBIs on a year-to-year basis. But riddle me this. In the years preceding, 22 and even into 23, we continuously were looking for a first baseman. We finally found one with the smart trade for Michael Busch. But at the time, there was no ready replacement. And that was my main criticism. It was, if you're going to trade Anthony Rizzo, if you're going to trade Chris Bryant, do you have a replacement in-house, or do you have a plan to find that replacement? Well, it's taken a couple of years to finally get there. I think Michael Busch is a great first baseman. Matt Shaw is starting to turn the corner a little bit, but they certainly haven't replaced Rizzo and Bryant in that lineup. It still has become a problem. And then, of course, trading Javi Baez, I was fine with it, and I'm even more fine with it now because Pete Armstrong is in the fold. So he was given a really tough task. And at that time, a couple of years ago, Jed Hoyer said, my job is to go out there and try and build the next great Cubs team. And as it stands right now, the Cubs fighting for the division, one of the top 4 records in baseball. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as to say that they are the next great Cubs team. But Jed has done a nice job of turning this around pretty quickly. There's 2 bad seasons of 70-ish wins for 2 years, and then back-to-back 83-win seasons, both of them frustrating, but at least pointed in the right direction, and now this team on pace to win 90 games. Jed Hoyer has done a lot of good for the Chicago Cubs. He got Shota Imanaga at a great price, became an all-star. He won the bidding for Seiya Suzuki, currently top 3 right now in Major League Baseball in RBIs. He traded for Michael Busch. Found a guy that was ready to just come up, but the Dodgers didn't have any room for him. The Baez trade for PCA. That's a good deal by Jed Hoyer. I'm being sarcastic. It's an amazing deal. So you start to look at all these pieces a little bit, and even if you go back to 2022, signing a guy like Cody Bellinger, a guy that no one really wanted, and then brought him up and he became an MVP type candidate, it was a good move by Jed. And sure, there's been plenty of bad ones. He walked into last year without a bullpen plan. When he tried to jumpstart a little bit this rebuild by signing guys like Trey Mancini, Tucker Barnhart, Eric Hosmer. Not only did they underperform, but he signed them to these too long of these 2-year contracts where he had to pay out money in the end. And I'm sure ownership did not appreciate that. But as I'm listing things off about Jed Hoyer, it's become pretty obvious that he's done more good than he has done bad here in Chicago. And now he has a 5-year extension. My only pushback on this is that as a Cubs fan, when we walked into this year and we knew that Jed was out of contract at the end of this season, I think we all said and thought, well, Jed, it's playoffs or bust, and he could possibly be out of a job. The Chicago Cubs right now are in position to do that. But the job is not done. And he just received a 5-year extension without yet making the playoffs. Now, I still believe the Chicago Cubs are going to do it. I think that they are a good baseball team. I think they got the horses. And as with this taping right now, they probably haven't added or acquired some players that are probably going to hopefully make me very happy by the time I do the next episode. But you can't run away from the fact that when it comes to Jed Hoyer, and the mandate was playoffs or bust to earn a contract extension, he simply just hasn't earned that yet. It is a bit of a TBD. Another thing that's a TBD, a lot of people want to put it in the win column. I'm not ready to do that, is Kyle Tucker. And not because of the quality of player that Kyle Tucker is. The issue is when you traded for Kyle Tucker, the hope was not only were the Cubs going to be good, but then you would sign him to a long-term deal. That hasn't happened yet either. So there's two really important factors that haven't even come to its conclusion yet, and Jed Hoyer has a 5-year contract. And just to be very fair, as a Cubs fan, I think at the very least making the playoffs isn't asking much. It's been a while in this town. Signing Kyle Tucker to a long-term deal, that's going to have to wait and see a little bit, and we're going to have to be determined on whether that was a good trade or not. But Jed Hoyer, 5-year extension, why did it happen now? Well, partly I think one of the reasons is it was important probably for organizational stability that Jed Hoyer get this extension now, because maybe there's some moves that he's trying to make that are not only going to make the team better this year, but might make the team better for years to come. And if you're in the position of Jed and you're going to try and make those moves, you might be trading some high-end prospect capital. The type of capital that you're going to have to replenish, and maybe the type of capital that you know that you can already substitute with some guys that are already in your system. But the one thing I will say with this 5-year extension right now is that it is luxury tax time for the Chicago Cubs. Last year, due to a clerical error, the Chicago Cubs entered the luxury tax. This year, they are below the luxury tax, and I would be shocked and surprised if by the trade deadline, they go over that mark. I think they're going to stay under it this year. And what happens is, for those that aren't too familiar, and look, I'm not a math whiz either, so I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible, that when you enter into the luxury tax, you enter into a window where you can only hit the luxury tax so many times before you have to climb back under. It continues to get more punitive year after year after year. But the good news is, once you go into that luxury tax, it's a bit of a no looking back. It's a bit of a now's the time. And you can spend, in theory, however you want to for that certain stretch of time. And if you're saying the Chicago Cubs are going to enter the luxury tax for the next 3 or 4 years, I'm glad it's going to be Jed Hoyer in place. The only thing is, I hope that it actually happens. And it isn't just going to take money to make the Chicago Cubs special or have them go deep into the playoffs. But if you are the Chicago Cubs and you do have the muscle, you do have the ability to go out and outbid somebody. You do have the ability to go out and shore up your weaknesses through spending money. If you're the Chicago Cubs, you should be able to do that. And if you're walking into this trade deadline trying to make your team better and you're about to get rid of a bunch of prospects and you have less players maybe coming up and graduating to the big league club, you are going to need that money also to supplement your roster. The good news is, in terms of Jed, is they've graduated a lot of players. Some of them maybe not necessarily have worked out yet, and some of them are already turning into budding superstars, but it is a credit to Jed Hoyer that he has graduated Miguel Amaya. He's graduated Pete Crow Armstrong. He's graduated Matt Shaw. He's graduated Cade Horton. He's graduated Ben Brown. These are all significant pieces that the Chicago Cubs can control for a very fair, financial contract over the next couple of years. So when it comes to Jed, I am on board with him getting an extension. I think he's been a great representative of the franchise. He's delivered a World Series. This is his team. He's gotten a couple years to rebuild it. In theory, the rebuild should be over, and now we're supposed to be going for it and being competitive. So all I'm saying is that I'm glad that he got the extension, but now the job still isn't done. Now is not the time to rest on your laurels, or now is not the time to say, let's just trust the process. I think the Chicago Cubs need to get aggressive, not just at this trade deadline, but then in the offseason. And then let's seriously compete for multiple World Series over the next 3 or 4 years. And when we come out the other side with possible labor strife coming down the pipe, at the very least, we can say that we've put ourselves in a position to get back to the point of what Jed talked about a couple years ago, about being that next great Cubs team.